The cold bite of the Wyoming winter air stung Lucy Evans's cheeks as she stood before the weathered ranch house, her knuckles poised to knock, but her courage wavering like the smoke from the chimney above. It was 1879, and the long journey from Boston had left her with nothing but the clothes on her back, a small valise of possessions, and the advertisement clipped from a newspaper promising work for a laundress at the Lowell cattle ranch. Lucy took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the crumpled paper. At 22, she had fled the only life she'd known, escaping a future that had been arranged without her consent. The West represented freedom, opportunity, and most importantly, anonymity. With one final prayer for courage, she knocked on the door. The sound of small footsteps approached before the door swung open to reveal a boy of about 8 or 9 years, with tousled brown hair and curious eyes that widened at the sight of her. "Hello," Lucy said, her voice barely audible over the whistling wind. "I've come about the position. For the laundress." The boy studied her for a moment before turning his head toward the interior of the house. "Pa! A lady's here. Says she wants to wash." Heavy footsteps approached, and Lucy straightened her spine, adjusting her threadbare coat with cold, stiffened fingers. The man who appeared in the doorway filled it completely, his broad shoulders nearly touching both sides of the frame. He was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with a face weathered by sun and wind. Dark blonde hair fell across his forehead, and a neatly trimmed beard framed a mouth that seemed unused to smiling. "You're here about the washing position?" His voice was deep, with a rough edge that suggested he used it sparingly. "Yes, sir. My name is Lucy Evans. I saw your advertisement in the newspaper." His blue eyes took her measure, clearly noting her city clothes and delicate hands. "You don't look like you've done much washing, Miss Evans." Lucy lifted her chin. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Lowell, and I learn quickly." A ghost of a smile passed across his face. "It's just Luke. Luke Lowell." He stepped back from the doorway. "Come in before you freeze to death. We can discuss the position by the fire." The warmth of the house wrapped around Lucy like an embrace as she stepped inside. The main room was simply furnished but clean, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A rocking chair sat nearby, and a rough-hewn table with 4 chairs occupied the center of the space. "This is my son James," Luke said, resting his hand on the boy's shoulder. "James, this is Miss Evans." "Madam," the boy said with a respectful nod. "Hello, James," Lucy replied, trying to hide her trembling as warmth returned to her fingers. "Take her coat, son," Luke instructed, and James dutifully helped Lucy remove her outer garment. "When did you arrive in Sweetwater?" Luke asked, gesturing for her to sit at the table. "This morning on the eastbound train." Lucy sat, placing her valise at her feet. "I came directly from the station." Luke frowned. "You have lodgings in town?" Lucy hesitated. "Not yet. I thought to secure employment first." The rancher exchanged a glance with his son before turning back to Lucy. "The position includes room and board. There's a small cabin behind the main house. It's nothing fancy, but it's dry and has a good stove." Relief flooded through Lucy. "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Lowell." "Luke," he corrected her again. "The work is hard, Miss Evans. There's washing for myself and James, plus 2 ranch hands who stay in the bunkhouse. Linens, clothes. Everything needs washing at least once a week. You'll also be expected to help with some cooking and cleaning." "I understand, and I'm willing to work hard," Lucy assured him, though in truth, she had never done laundry for more than herself. James, who had been watching the exchange with keen interest, suddenly spoke up. "Pa, can she start today? My shirts are still dirty from last week." Luke ran a hand through his hair. "James, Miss Evans hasn't even agreed to take the position yet." "I'll take it," Lucy said quickly. Perhaps too quickly. "I can start immediately." Luke studied her face for a long moment, and Lucy felt as though he could see straight through to her desperation. "Very well," he finally said. "James will show you to the cabin and help bring water. You can start with the linens tomorrow." "Thank you," Lucy said, fighting back tears of relief. "You won't regret it." As James led her out the back door toward a small cabin about 50 yards from the main house, Lucy felt her spirits lifting for the first time in months. The cabin was indeed small, with just one room containing a bed, a table with a single chair, a chest of drawers, and a cast-iron stove in the corner. But it was clean and solid, and most importantly, it was hers. "Pa built this for Mrs. Hodges when she worked for us," James explained as he lit the stove. "But she went back east last fall when her daughter had a baby." "It's lovely," Lucy said, running her hand over the simple quilt on the bed. "I'll bring water for washing up," James offered. "Pa says we need to be hospitable." "Thank you, James. That's very kind." When the boy returned with a bucket of water, Lucy noticed his struggle to lift it. "This is heavy," he said, carefully placing it near the stove. "Pa usually heats water for my bath, but it's always cold by the time I get in." Lucy smiled. "Well, I'll make sure your bath water stays warm from now on." James brightened. "Really? That would be wonderful. I hate cold baths." After James left, Lucy sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to relax. The cabin was sparse but secure, and the job would provide food and shelter. For now, that was enough. Tomorrow, she would face the challenge of proving herself worthy of Luke Lowell's trust. Dawn broke cold and clear the next morning. Lucy woke to frost patterns on the inside of her window and the distant sounds of ranch life already in full swing. She dressed quickly in her plainest dress, pinned her auburn hair into a practical knot, and made her way to the main house. Luke was at the table drinking coffee when she knocked and entered at his call. "Good morning," she said, fighting her nervousness. He nodded, looking slightly surprised to see her. "Morning, Miss Evans. Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you. The cabin is very comfortable." He gestured to the stove. "Coffee's hot if you want some. James is still asleep. Boy could sleep through a stampede." Lucy poured herself a cup, grateful for its warmth. "I thought I'd start with the linens today, if that's agreeable." "The wash house is behind the bunkhouse," Luke explained. "You'll find everything you need there. Tubs, soap, the wringer. Water pumps just outside. The men bring in their washing on Fridays, but you can start with the house linens today." Lucy nodded, determined not to show her apprehension. How hard could washing be? People had been doing it for centuries. Very hard, as it turned out. By midday, Lucy's hands were red and raw, her back ached, and she had managed to soak herself thoroughly despite the heavy apron she'd found hanging in the wash house. The sheets and tablecloths were now hanging on the line, flapping in the cold breeze. But the process had been far more arduous than she'd anticipated. She was struggling to wring out a particularly heavy blanket when a voice startled her. "You're doing it wrong." Lucy turned to find James watching her from the doorway, bundled in a coat too large for his small frame. "Am I?" she asked, trying to keep the frustration from her voice. James nodded solemnly. "Mrs. Hodges used to twist it this way." He demonstrated with his hands, and Pa built her a bench to help with the wringing. "Did he now?" Lucy wiped a strand of hair from her forehead with her forearm. "Would you show me?" James eagerly came forward and pointed out a low wooden bench in the corner that Lucy had assumed was just for sitting. Upon closer inspection, she saw that it had a clever mechanism attached for wringing water from heavy items. "Your father is quite ingenious," Lucy remarked, genuinely impressed. "Pa can fix anything," James said proudly. "He built our whole house himself after Ma died." Lucy paused, her hands stilling on the wet fabric. "I'm sorry about your mother, James." The boy shrugged with the resilience of youth. "I don't really remember her. I was just a baby when she got sick." Pa says she was beautiful, though. I'm sure she was, Lucy said gently. Pa says I need a bath tonight, James announced, changing the subject abruptly. Will you make the water warm like you promised? Lucy smiled despite her exhaustion. Of course I will. A promise is a promise. That evening, true to her word, Lucy heated water for James's bath, carefully maintaining its temperature until the boy was ready. She carried the buckets to the main house where Luke had set up a metal tub in the kitchen. James touched the water cautiously before breaking into a delighted grin. It's warm, really warm. He turned to his father excitedly. Pa, she makes the water warm. Can we keep her? Luke's eyes met Lucy's over his son's head, embarrassment clear in his expression. James, Miss Evans isn't a stray puppy. She's our employee. But she's nice, Pa. And she makes the water warm. James's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper that was still perfectly audible. Mrs. Hodges never did that. Into the tub with you, Luke said firmly, before the water gets cold and Miss Evans's efforts are wasted. Lucy smiled. I'll leave you to it then. Good night, James. Good night, Mr. Lowell. Luke. He corrected her automatically, then added, Thank you, Miss Evans. For the water. Lucy, she countered, and was rewarded with the first genuine smile she'd seen on his face. Lucy, he repeated, and somehow her name sounded different in his deep voice. Good night. As Lucy walked back to her cabin through the crisp night air, she reflected on her first day at the Lowell Ranch. Her body ached from unfamiliar labor, but there was satisfaction in having completed her tasks, and James's delight over the warm bath water had been worth the extra effort. More puzzling was her reaction to Luke Lowell's smile, the way her heart had quickened when he said her name. Ridiculous, she chided herself. She had come west to escape one man's control. The last thing she needed was to develop foolish fancies about another. The following weeks established a rhythm to Lucy's life at the ranch. She rose early, worked hard throughout the day, and collapsed into bed each night, too exhausted to dream of the past she'd fled. The washing became easier as she learned the proper techniques, and she found satisfaction in seeing clean clothes and linens fluttering on the line. Luke was gone much of the time, riding out with his men to tend to the cattle, fix fences, or handle the countless other tasks required to maintain the ranch. When their paths did cross, their exchanges were brief and practical, though Lucy noticed his eyes lingering on her occasionally when he thought she wasn't looking. James, however, was a constant presence, appearing whenever Lucy worked near the house, eager to help or simply chat. He was a bright, curious child, and Lucy found herself looking forward to their conversations. "Why'd you come out west all alone?" he asked one afternoon as he helped her fold clean clothes in the yard. Lucy considered how to answer. "I wanted an adventure," she said finally, "and a chance to make my own way." "Weren't you scared?" "Pa says the journey can be dangerous for a woman alone." "Sometimes being brave means doing something even when you're scared," Lucy replied, carefully avoiding a direct answer. "Like when you climbed that big tree last week, even though you were afraid of falling." James beamed at the comparison. "Pa says courage isn't not being afraid, it's doing what needs doing anyway." "Your father is a wise man," Lucy said, meaning it. "He likes you," James announced suddenly. Lucy nearly dropped the shirt she was folding. "What makes you say that?" "He watches you when you're not looking." And he started shaving every day again. James's matter-of-fact tone made the observation seem all the more startling. "I'm sure he's just being polite," Lucy said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Now, help me with these socks." Later that evening, as Lucy was preparing to return to her cabin after delivering fresh linens to the main house, Luke arrived home from a long day of work. He looked tired but brightened visibly when he saw her. "Lucy," he said, removing his hat, "still working at this hour?" Just finishing up, she replied, suddenly conscious of her work-worn appearance. You've been a godsend these past few weeks, he said, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. The place hasn't been this well kept since. He trailed off, a shadow crossing his face. Since your wife, Lucy finished softly. Luke nodded, moving to the stove to pour himself coffee. Sarah was a good woman, not cut out for ranch life, as it turned out. But she tried. He turned to face Lucy. James has taken a shine to you. He's a wonderful boy, Lucy said sincerely. You've done a fine job raising him. I've done my best. Luke hesitated, then asked, would you stay for supper? Nothing fancy. Just stew I put on this morning. The invitation caught Lucy off guard. In the 3 weeks she'd been at the ranch, she'd always taken her meals alone in her cabin. I wouldn't want to impose. It's no imposition, Luke assured her. James would be pleased and… He cleared his throat. So would I. Lucy found herself accepting before she could overthink it. Supper that night marked a shift in her relationship with the Lowells. What had been a purely professional arrangement began to take on a more familiar quality. Soon, Lucy was taking most of her evening meals with Luke and James, helping with the cooking as well as the washing. One evening in early March, as a late winter storm howled outside, the three of them sat comfortably around the kitchen table, playing a game of checkers after supper. James had just been thoroughly beaten by his father and was trying to convince Lucy to take his place. Pa never lets me win, he complained good-naturedly. Wouldn't be doing you any favors if I did, Luke replied, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. Life doesn't let you win just because you're young. Your father's right, Lucy said, taking the seat opposite Luke. But perhaps I can avenge your defeat. Luke raised an eyebrow, a challenge in his eyes. You play checkers, Miss Evans? My father taught me, Lucy admitted, the memory bringing both joy and pain. He never let me win either. As they played, Lucy found herself enjoying the comfortable silence that fell between moves, the concentration on Luke's face, the way the firelight caught in his hair. She hadn't felt this at ease in anyone's company for a long time. You're good, Luke acknowledged when she captured one of his pieces. My father would be pleased to hear it, Lucy said, smiling at the memory. He always said I had a strategic mind. Where is your father now? Luke asked, making his next move. Lucy's smile faded. He passed away last year. Influenza. I'm sorry, Luke said, genuine sympathy in his voice. It's hard to lose a parent. It was difficult, Lucy agreed, especially since my mother died when I was young. Much like James, I hardly remember her. James, who had been quietly observing the game, perked up at this. So you know what it's like? Not having a ma? I do, Lucy said gently. It leaves a hole that nothing quite fills. But my father did his best, as your father is doing for you. Luke's eyes met hers across the board, a moment of understanding passing between them. Checkers, he said softly, making his final move. Lucy looked down to find he had indeed outplayed her. Well done, Mr. Lowell. It seems I'm not the only strategist at this table. Luke, he reminded her, his voice warm. After all these suppers together, I think we've moved beyond formalities, don't you? Luke, she repeated, enjoying the way his name felt on her lips. Can Lucy read me a story before bed? James asked, yawning widely. Luke glanced at Lucy. If she doesn't mind? I'd be delighted, Lucy said, touched by the request. After Lucy had read James a chapter from a well-worn copy of Robinson Crusoe and the boy had fallen asleep, she found Luke waiting for her in the main room, stoking the fire. Thank you, he said as she quietly closed James's door. He hasn't asked for a bedtime story since Sarah died. I tried for a while, but I'm not much of a reader. He's a special boy, Lucy said, moving toward the door. You should be proud. I am? Luke hesitated, then added, It's been good having you here, Lucy. For both of us. Something in his voice made her look up, and the intensity in his eyes caught her breath. For a moment she thought he might say more, might step toward her, but instead, he simply nodded. Good night, Lucy. Good night. Luke? As Lucy made her way back to her cabin through the snow, she wrapped her shawl tightly around herself, but the warmth she felt came from within. Despite her best efforts to guard her heart, she was beginning to care deeply for both Luke and James Lowell. Spring arrived with a suddenness that transformed the landscape. The snow melted, revealing tender green shoots beneath, and the air filled with the scent of new growth and possibility. Lucy found herself humming as she hung washing on the line, enjoying the feel of the sun on her face after the long winter. The change in seasons brought new challenges and activities to the ranch. Luke and his men were busy from dawn to dusk, preparing for the spring roundup, repairing winter damage, and tending to the new calves. James started attending school in town again after the winter break, riding in with one of the ranch hands each morning and returning in the afternoon. Lucy's duties expanded as well. With Luke's blessing, she had started a small kitchen garden behind her cabin, planting vegetables that would supplement their meals in the summer and fall. She took pride in watching the tiny seeds sprout and grow, much as she took pride in the increasingly comfortable atmosphere of the main house, where her touch was evident in the fresh curtains, polished surfaces, and always full cookie jar that James raided daily upon his return from school. One warm afternoon in late April, Lucy was kneeling in her garden, weeding around the tender pea shoots, when a shadow fell across her work. Looking up, she found Luke standing there, hat in hand. "You've got quite the green thumb," he observed, surveying her neat rows of plantings. Lucy brushed the dirt from her hands and stood. "My father had a small garden behind our house in Boston. He taught me the basics, though I'm learning as I go." Luke nodded, seeming unusually hesitant. "Lucy, I've been meaning to ask you something." Her heart quickened. "Yes?" "The spring dance is coming up in town next Saturday. I was wondering if you might like to attend." "With me?" He added the last two words quickly, as if afraid she might misunderstand. Lucy stared at him, momentarily speechless. The spring dance was a social event, not a work obligation. Luke was asking to court her, as formally as one could in the Wyoming territory. "I'd like that very much," she finally managed, a smile spreading across her face. Relief visibly washed over him. "Good. That's good." He settled his hat back on his head. "I'll arrange for Mrs. Peterson from the neighboring ranch to stay with James." "What about my dress?" Lucy asked suddenly, glancing down at her work clothes. "I don't have anything suitable for a dance." Luke's eyes crinkled at the corners. "I thought you might say that. There's a package on your bed. Call it an early birthday present, though I don't actually know when your birthday is." "August 17th, Lucy said automatically, then added, "You bought me a dress?" "Had it ordered from Cheyenne," Luke admitted. "Mrs. Peterson helped with the sizing. I hope that's not too presumptuous." Lucy was touched beyond words. "No one has given me a gift in a very long time," she said softly. "Well, get used to it," Luke replied, his voice gruff with emotion. "You deserve nice things, Lucy Evans." He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Lucy staring after him, her heart full of a feeling she was finally ready to name: love. The dress was beautiful, a deep blue calico with a lace collar and small pearl buttons down the front. It fit perfectly, and when Lucy tried it on, twirling in the small confines of her cabin, she felt transformed. Not into someone else, but into the woman she was meant to be: strong, independent, yet open to the love that had unexpectedly found her. The night of the dance arrived clear and mild, with a full moon illuminating the landscape. Luke had cleaned up impressively, wearing a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and his good boots, his hair neatly combed. He stopped short when Lucy emerged from her cabin in the blue dress, her auburn hair arranged in soft curls around her face. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The ride to town was filled with a companionable silence, both of them aware that something significant had shifted between them. The town hall was decorated with spring flowers and lanterns, and a small band played lively tunes in the corner. Several people greeted Luke warmly, their curious gazes lingering on Lucy. "Luke Lowell, as I live and breathe," a plump, friendly-looking woman exclaimed, approaching them. "And who is this lovely young lady?" "Mrs. Henderson, this is Lucy Evans," Luke said. "Lucy, Margaret Henderson runs the general store in town. The laundress who's got young James singing your praises all over town," Mrs. Henderson said, beaming at Lucy. "That boy comes into my store every week with some new tale about how wonderful you are. Miss Lucy makes the best cookies. Miss Lucy taught me to fold paper boats. You've made quite an impression." Lucy blushed. "James is easy to please." "Unlike his father," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing wink at Luke. "Good to see you out and about, Luke. It's been too long." As the woman moved away to greet other arrivals, Luke leaned close to Lucy's ear. "Ignore her. The town's been trying to marry me off since Sarah died." "And why haven't they succeeded?" Lucy asked, suddenly curious about the women who must have come before her. Luke's eyes held hers steadily. "Because none of them were you." The simple statement stole Lucy's breath. Before she could respond, the band struck up a waltz, and Luke offered his hand. "May I have this dance, Miss Evans?" Lucy placed her hand in his. "You may, Mr. Lowell." As they moved across the floor, Lucy was vaguely aware of the eyes following them, of the whispers that undoubtedly speculated about her relationship with the widowed rancher. But all that mattered was the feel of Luke's hand at her waist, the strength in his shoulders beneath her fingers, and the look in his eyes that told her she was exactly where she belonged. They danced several more times, with breaks for refreshments and conversations with Luke's neighbors and friends. Lucy was introduced to so many people that the names began to blur together, but she was touched by the genuine welcome she received from most of them. "You're good for him," an elderly man named Mr. Simmons told her as they watched Luke speaking with some of the ranchers across the room. "Haven't seen him smile this much since before Sarah took ill." "He's a good man," Lucy said, her eyes following Luke's animated gestures as he described something to his companions. "That he is," Mr. Simmons agreed. "Deserves some happiness after all he's been through." "You both do, I expect." Lucy turned to him, startled. "What makes you say that?" The old man's eyes were kind. "Recognizes it in others, I suppose. That look of someone who's had to start over. Saw it in my own mirror after the war." Before Lucy could respond, Luke returned to her side, and Mr. Simmons drifted away with a knowing nod. "Everything all right?" Luke asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "Yes," Lucy assured him. "Just thinking about new beginnings." Luke's gaze softened. "Would you like to step outside for a moment? It's getting warm in here." The night air was cool and refreshing after the heat of the crowded hall. Luke led Lucy to a small garden behind the building, where a bench sat beneath a blooming apple tree. The scent of the blossoms filled the air, and moonlight filtered through the branches, dappling the ground with silver. "I've been wanting to get you alone all evening," Luke admitted as they sat. "There's something I need to tell you." Lucy's heart quickened. "What is it?" Luke took a deep breath. "When Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over. I focused on James, on the ranch, on just getting through each day. I didn't think I'd ever want to share my life with someone again." He turned to face her directly. "Then you arrived on my doorstep, city clothes and all, looking like you'd never done a hard day's work in your life." Lucy laughed softly. "I hadn't." But you learned, Luke continued, taking her hand. You worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. You made a home for James and me again. You brought warmth back into our lives in ways that go far beyond bathwater. He reached up to touch her cheek gently. I'm falling in love with you, Lucy Evans. I think I started the moment you stood on my porch and told me you were stronger than you looked. Tears welled in Lucy's eyes. Luke, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I know it's soon, and I don't want to pressure you. I just needed you to know how I feel. Lucy shook her head, smiling through her tears. I was going to say that I'm falling in love with you too. Relief and joy transformed Luke's face. Really? Really? Lucy confirmed, though I tried not to. I came west to be independent, to escape. She stopped abruptly, the specter of her past suddenly intruding on the perfect moment. Luke's expression grew concerned. To escape what, Lucy? Lucy took a deep breath. If she was going to build a life with this man, she needed to be honest with him. To escape an arranged marriage. My father's business partner, Mr. Blackwell, was nearly 30 years my senior. When my father died, he left the business in dire financial straits. Mr. Blackwell offered to cover the debts in exchange for my hand. Luke's face darkened. He tried to buy you? Essentially, Lucy admitted. With my father gone and no other family to turn to, I had few options. So I sold what little I had left, bought a train ticket west, and answered your advertisement. You're very brave, Luke said, his voice thick with emotion. Braver than me, I think. No, Lucy disagreed. Raising a son alone. Keeping this ranch going after losing your wife, that takes true courage. Luke's hand tightened around hers. Maybe we're both braver than we thought. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. But Lucy met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that was gentle at first, then deepened with shared longing and newfound hope. When they finally parted, Luke rested his forehead against hers. I want to court you properly, Lucy Evans, and if you'll have me, I want to make you my wife someday. Lucy's heart soared. I'd like that very much. Luke Lowell. The return to the ranch that night felt like a journey into a new life. As the wagon rolled along beneath the star-filled sky, Lucy leaned against Luke's shoulder, content in a way she had never thought possible. James was waiting up for them, despite Mrs. Peterson's clear efforts to get him to bed. He bounded down the porch steps as the wagon approached. Did you dance? He asked excitedly. Did they have cake? Did everyone like your pretty dress, Lucy? Luke lifted his son onto the wagon seat between them. Yes to all three questions, young man. Now shouldn't you be in bed? I wanted to wait for you, James said, stifling a yawn. Did you ask her, Pa? Luke's eyes met Lucy's over the boy's head. Ask her what? If she'll stay forever, James said matter-of-factly. You said you were going to. Lucy bit back a smile as Luke's face reddened slightly. I did ask her something like that, he admitted. James turned to Lucy expectantly. And? Will you stay? Be part of our family? Lucy's heart melted at the hope in the boy's eyes. I'd like that more than anything, James. See, Pa? James said triumphantly. I told you she'd say yes. I told you the day she came that we should keep her. Luke laughed, a deep, full sound that echoed in the night air. That you did, son. That you did. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Lucy's life. Spring blossomed into early summer, and with it, her relationship with Luke deepened. They took things slowly, aware of the significance of forming a new family with James. Luke courted her properly, with bouquets of wildflowers, Sunday rides across the ranch land, and stolen kisses when James wasn't watching. Word had spread through Sweetwater about their courtship, and Lucy found herself welcomed into the community as Luke Lowell's intended, though no formal engagement had yet been announced. She continued her laundry duties, but increasingly took on the role of mistress of the household, managing the domestic affairs of the ranch with growing confidence. One evening in early June, as Lucy sat on the porch of the main house, shelling peas from her garden, Luke joined her, his expression troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting aside her work. "Got a telegram from Cheyenne today," he said, sitting beside her. "Cattle buyers will be here in 2 weeks, earlier than expected. I need to ride out to the north pasture tomorrow, check on the herd there before the roundup. I'll be gone 3 or 4 days." "We'll manage just fine," Lucy assured him, though the thought of his absence created a hollow feeling in her chest. Luke took her hand. "That's not what's bothering me. Lucy, I've been waiting for the right moment, but there never seems to be one perfect enough." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "I had this made in town last month. I've been carrying it around, waiting." Lucy's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. "It's not much," Luke said apologetically. "Not what you probably had back east." "It's perfect," Lucy interrupted, tears welling in her eyes. Luke took the ring from the box. "Lucy Evans, will you marry me? Be a mother to James and a wife to me? Make this house a real home again?" "Yes," Lucy whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes to all of it." Luke slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and commitment. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," she replied, knowing with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. They decided to marry in August, shortly after Lucy's 23rd birthday. There was much to do before then, a proper wedding dress to be made, arrangements with the minister, preparations for the celebration that the entire town would undoubtedly attend. But first, Luke needed to complete his business with the cattle buyers, which meant his trip to the north pasture couldn't be delayed. The morning of his departure, Lucy and James stood in the yard to see him off. "Be careful," Lucy said, straightening his collar unnecessarily. "Always am," Luke assured her, kissing her forehead. "I'll be back before you know it. James, you take care of Lucy while I'm gone." "I will, Pa," the boy promised solemnly. "We'll be fine." As Luke rode away, Lucy felt an unexpected pang of anxiety. She had grown so accustomed to his presence, his strength, his love, that even a few days' separation seemed daunting. "Don't worry," James said, slipping his small hand into hers. "Pa always comes back." Lucy squeezed his hand. "Of course he does." The first 2 days of Luke's absence passed uneventfully. Lucy kept busy with her usual tasks, and James helped more than usual, clearly taking his responsibility to take care of Lucy very seriously. On the third day, however, storm clouds began gathering on the horizon by mid-afternoon, and a steady rain began falling by supper time. "Will Pa be all right in the rain?" James asked as they ate their evening meal, the sound of water drumming on the roof. "He's probably found shelter," Lucy assured him, though she found herself glancing repeatedly at the window as the storm intensified. "Your father knows the land better than anyone." That night, after tucking James into bed, Lucy sat by the window in the main room, watching the rain lash against the glass. The storm had grown into a full gale, with wind howling around the corners of the house and thunder shaking the rafters. Luke should have been home by now, she thought, twisting her engagement ring anxiously. Unless he'd decided to wait out the storm wherever he was. Sleep eluded her that night, and when dawn broke, the storm had passed, but left a transformed landscape in its wake. Streams had overflowed their banks, and muddy water pooled in the low areas of the yard. By midday, with still no sign of Luke, Lucy's anxiety had grown into real fear. The ranch hands, returning from checking the nearby pastures, reported that several streams had become raging torrents, making travel difficult. "Should we go looking for him?" Lucy asked Ben, the senior ranch hand who had been with Luke for years. Ben's weathered face showed his own concern. "If he's not back by tomorrow morning, we'll send out a search party. Luke knows this land like the back of his hand, Miss Lucy. He'll find his way home." Lucy nodded, trying to take comfort in the man's confidence. But as another night fell with no word, she found herself pacing the floor, imagining all manner of accidents that could have befallen her fiancé. James, picking up on her anxiety, was subdued at bedtime. "Pa's going to be all right, isn't he?" he asked as Lucy tucked him in. "Of course he is," Lucy said with a confidence she didn't feel. "Your father is the strongest, smartest man I know. He's probably just delayed by the storm damage." The boy's eyes searched hers. "You promise?" Lucy hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I promise. Now get some sleep." Dawn had barely broken when the sound of hoofbeats in the yard brought Lucy running to the door. But it wasn't Luke who dismounted from the exhausted horse. It was Ben and another ranch hand, their faces grim. "We found his horse," Ben said without preamble. "About 5 miles north near Willow Creek. The creek's flooded bad, washed out part of the bank. No sign of Luke, but—" He held out a muddy hat, Luke's hat. Lucy's world tilted sideways. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "No, he can't be." "We're organizing a proper search," Ben assured her quickly. "All the neighboring ranches are sending men. We'll find him, Miss Lucy." Lucy straightened her spine with effort. "I'm coming with you." Ben shook his head. "That's not a good idea. The terrain's rough and—" "I'm coming," Lucy repeated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "James can stay with Mrs. Peterson. I need to be there when you find him." The search party assembled quickly, 20 men from the surrounding ranches, all mounted and ready to comb the area where Luke's horse had been found. Lucy rode beside Ben, her heart pounding with fear and determination. She had not come this far, found this love, only to lose it to a capricious storm. Willow Creek, normally a gentle stream, had become a churning mass of muddy water, its banks eroded and trees uprooted along its course. The men spread out, searching both sides of the swollen waterway, calling Luke's name over the rush of the current. Hours passed with no sign of him. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the searchers, but Lucy refused to rest. She rode tirelessly alongside the men, her eyes scanning every inch of the landscape for a glimpse of the man she loved. It was mid-afternoon when a shout went up from downstream. Lucy kicked her horse into a gallop, her heart in her throat as she raced toward the sound. Several men had dismounted near a tangle of fallen trees and debris caught in a bend of the creek. "We found something," one of them called as Lucy approached. She slid from her horse before it had fully stopped, stumbling in her haste to reach them. The men parted to let her through, their faces solemn. There, half buried in mud and branches, was Luke's distinctive leather vest. Lucy's knees gave way, and she would have fallen if Ben hadn't caught her arm. "That doesn't mean anything," he said firmly. "He could have lost it in the current. Keep looking." The men redoubled their efforts, spreading farther downstream, while Lucy remained rooted to the spot, clutching the muddy vest to her chest. "Please," she whispered, a prayer to whatever power might be listening. "Please don't take him from us." The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when another call rang out, this time from a stand of cottonwoods a quarter-mile downstream from where they'd found the vest. Lucy ran toward the sound, heedless of the rough terrain, driven by desperate hope. A cluster of men stood at the edge of a small clearing, and in their midst, sitting propped against a tree trunk, was Luke Lowell. His face was pale beneath a layer of mud, his left arm hung awkwardly at his side, but he was alive, his eyes finding Lucy's as she burst into the clearing. "Lucy," he said, his voice hoarse but unmistakably his. She fell to her knees beside him, hands hovering over him, afraid to touch and cause more pain. Luke! Oh God, Luke! Careful, Miss Lucy, Ben cautioned, his shoulders dislocated, and he's got a nasty gash on his leg. Creek washed me downstream, Luke explained weakly. Lost my footing trying to cross where it looked shallow. Horse bolted. Don't talk, Lucy said, tears streaming down her face as she gently pushed his hair back from his forehead. Save your strength. We're going to get you home. The men fashioned a travois to transport Luke back to the ranch, a painful journey that took well into the evening. By the time they arrived, the doctor had been summoned from town and was waiting to treat Luke's injuries. Dislocated shoulder, laceration to the right thigh that needed stitches, mild concussion, and exhaustion, the doctor reported to Lucy after his examination. He's a lucky man, Miss Evans. Another night out there, with that leg wound, and we might be having a very different conversation. But he'll recover? Lucy asked anxiously. With proper care, absolutely, the doctor assured her. Keep the wound clean, make sure he rests that shoulder, and feed him up. He's lost a fair bit of blood. Lucy nodded, determination replacing her fear. I can do that. After the doctor left, Lucy sat beside Luke's bed, holding his good hand as he drifted in and out of sleep. James had been allowed a brief visit to see that his father was indeed alive and on the mend, before being sent to bed with promises that things would look better in the morning. In the quiet of the night, with just the sound of Luke's breathing and the occasional creak of the house settling, Lucy felt the full weight of what had almost happened. She had nearly lost him before their life together had properly begun. You're thinking too loud, Luke murmured, his eyes opening to focus on her face. Lucy smiled tremulously. I thought you were asleep. Was, he admitted. Woke up and found the most beautiful woman in Wyoming holding my hand. Seemed worth staying awake for. Despite everything, Lucy laughed softly. You're a charmer, Luke Lowell, even half drowned and beaten up. His expression sobered. I was afraid I wouldn't make it back to you and James. But you did, Lucy said firmly. You kept your promise. Luke squeezed her hand weakly. When I was out there, trying to stay conscious, trying to find my way back, all I could think about was you. Your smile, your voice. His eyes held hers intently. I don't want to wait until August, Lucy. Life's too unpredictable. Marry me as soon as I can stand up straight. Lucy's heart swelled. Are you sure? What about the big celebration, the proper wedding dress? All I need is you, Luke said simply. The rest is just trimmings. Leaning forward, Lucy pressed a gentle kiss to his lips. As soon as you can stand up straight, she agreed. I don't care if I'm wearing this very dress. I just want to be your wife. True to his word, as soon as Luke was well enough to stand without wincing, which took a full 3 weeks of Lucy's dedicated nursing, they made plans for a simple ceremony. The entire town was invited to a celebration afterward, but the wedding itself would be intimate, with just James, the minister, and a few close friends as witnesses. On a perfect July morning, with the sun painting the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink, Lucy stood in her cabin, making final adjustments to her appearance. She had decided against ordering a formal wedding gown, instead choosing a new dress of ivory muslin with delicate embroidery along the neckline and sleeves. Her auburn hair was arranged in a simple updo, adorned with sprigs of wildflowers that James had helped gather that morning. A knock at the door announced Mrs. Peterson, who had come to escort Lucy to the small garden behind the main house where the ceremony would take place. "Oh my!" the older woman exclaimed, her eyes misting. "Don't you look lovely, my dear?" "Thank you," Lucy said, suddenly nervous. "Is everything ready? Is Luke there?" "Everything's perfect," Mrs. Peterson assured her. "And yes, That handsome fiancé of yours is waiting, looking like he might burst with happiness." The garden was transformed. Luke and James had worked for days to create an arbor of twisted branches and summer blooms, under which the minister waited. A path of flower petals led from the cabin to this makeshift altar, and on either side stood the small gathering of friends who had come to witness their union. But Lucy saw none of it clearly. Her eyes were fixed on Luke, standing tall and straight beside the minister, his injured arm no longer in a sling but still held carefully at his side. He wore a new suit. His hair was neatly combed, but it was the look of absolute adoration on his face that took Lucy's breath away. James stood at his father's side, beaming with pride in his Sunday best, practically bouncing with excitement. As Lucy approached, the boy's smile grew even wider. "You look like an angel, Lucy," he whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, causing a ripple of affectionate laughter. "Thank you, James," Lucy whispered back, her heart full of love for this child who had so completely claimed a place in her heart. The ceremony was brief but deeply meaningful. Lucy and Luke exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to love, honor, and cherish, to create a family together, to face whatever challenges life presented as one. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Luke drew Lucy into a gentle embrace, mindful of his healing shoulder, and kissed her with a tenderness that spoke volumes about the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Mrs. Lowell," he murmured against her lips. "Mr. Lowell," she returned, a smile blossoming on her face. James tugged at their hands. "Does this mean Lucy is officially my ma now?" Luke glanced at Lucy, letting her answer. "If you'd like me to be," she said gently. James nodded vigorously. "I've been practicing calling you Ma in my head. I think it fits just right." Lucy knelt to embrace the boy, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Then that's who I'll be," she promised, "for all the days to come." The celebration that followed was everything a Western wedding party should be: abundant food, music from a local fiddler, dancing under the open sky, and congratulations from what seemed like the entire population of Sweetwater County. But the most precious moment for Lucy came later, after the guests had departed, and James had finally been persuaded to go to bed. Luke led her to the porch of what was now truly their home, where they sat together looking out at the star-filled sky, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him. "Happy, Mrs. Lowell?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Completely," Lucy affirmed. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," Luke admitted. "When you showed up on our doorstep that winter day, I had no idea you'd change our lives so completely." Lucy smiled at the memory. "I was so nervous. I had no idea how to do laundry properly. I was just desperate for a safe place to land." "And now?" Luke asked, his voice tender. "Now I'm home," Lucy said simply. "With the family I was meant to find." Luke's arm tightened around her. "James was right all along, you know." "About what?" "That first night when you heated his bathwater. 'She makes the water warm,'" Luke quoted, amusement in his voice. "Keep her, Pa." Lucy laughed softly. "Smart boy." "Smarter than his father," Luke agreed. "It took me weeks to realize what he knew right away, that you were exactly what we needed." "And you're exactly what I needed," Lucy replied, turning to face him. "A second chance, a fresh start, a love I never expected to find." Under the vast Wyoming sky, with the ranch sleeping peacefully around them and a lifetime of possibilities ahead, Luke Lowell kissed his bride, sealing the promise of their shared future with tenderness and passion. "Welcome home, Lucy Lowell," he whispered. "Welcome home." 10 years later, Lucy stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, watching as Luke demonstrated roping techniques to their youngest son, 5-year-old Matthew. James, now 18 and nearly as tall as his father, corrected his little brother's grip on the small practice rope with patient hands. To the side of the yard, 8-year-old Sarah sat with her nose in a book, occasionally glancing up to offer encouragement to her younger brother. With her auburn hair and serious expression, she was the image of Lucy at that age, though she had her father's blue eyes and stubborn determination. The Lowell Ranch had prospered over the decade of Lucy and Luke's marriage. The original house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family. The herd had doubled in size, and Luke's reputation as one of the finest cattlemen in the territory had grown. Lucy had continued to tend her garden, which had also expanded, providing vegetables not only for their family, but enough to sell in town during harvest season. Life wasn't always easy. The Wyoming territory could be harsh and unforgiving, with blizzards, droughts, and the occasional conflict with neighboring ranchers. But Lucy and Luke faced each challenge together, their bond strengthening with each obstacle overcome. "Ma!" Matthew called excitedly. "Look, I did it." Lucy applauded as her youngest successfully looped his rope around the practice post. "Well done, sweetheart." Luke caught her eye across the yard, his smile as warm and loving as it had been on their wedding day. 10 years had added a few lines to his face, a touch of gray at his temples. But to Lucy, he was more handsome than ever, a man who had built a life with her based on respect, partnership, and enduring love. James, now preparing to attend college in Denver come fall, the first Lowell to pursue higher education, slung an arm around his little brother's shoulders with obvious pride. The bond between the siblings was strong, despite the age differences, a testament to the loving home Lucy and Luke had created. As Lucy watched her family, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here from a frightened young woman fleeing an unwanted marriage to the confident, happy wife and mother she had become. She remembered that cold day when she had stood on the porch, nervous and unsure, offering to wash for a cowboy and his son. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Lowell," Luke said, coming up beside her and slipping an arm around her waist. Lucy leaned into his embrace. "I was just thinking about beginnings, how sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest happiness." Luke nodded, understanding immediately. "Running away from Boston?" Lucy agreed. "And you, hiring a city girl who'd never done laundry in her life." Luke chuckled. "Best decision I ever made." "Even better than letting James convince you to keep me?" Lucy teased. "That was James's decision," Luke corrected her, his eyes twinkling. "I just had the good sense to agree with him." Lucy laughed, the sound carrying across the yard and drawing smiles from their children. This was her legacy, she thought, not just the children they had brought into the world, but the love that filled this home, the warmth that extended to everyone who crossed their threshold. "I love you, Luke Lowell," she said, turning in his arms to face him. "For all the days of my life." "And I love you," he replied, bending to kiss her with the same tenderness he had shown on that first tentative kiss so many years ago. "My Boston laundress who made our water warm and our lives complete." As the Wyoming sun began its descent toward the distant mountains, painting the landscape in hues of gold and amber, the Lowell family gathered on the porch of the home they had built together, a testament to the power of love, courage, and the unexpected paths that lead to exactly where we're meant to be.